Hello, everybody who's joined in. Very good afternoon, good evening. We're at the cusp of the afternoon and evening here on Thursday afternoon. We'll just give it another minute, wait for people to join, and we'll begin sharp at 3 o'clock. You can see we have quite a few people who've joined before time. Thank you so much.
I think all research shows 3 p.m. is the toughest time in the week to keep people awake, right? 3 p.m. on a
Yes. It's also known to be a sweet spot when people ideally take a break from work, about to go for coffee or back from coffee. So I think a lot of us have done a lot of research on how to position ourselves, whether it's a volunteering activity or it's a webinar or basically an orientation session. I remember in my times, in my CSR roles, I would probably get a lot of people coming in at 3 o'clock. All right, I think we are at 3 o'clock. We are expecting close to about 100, 150 people to join in today. It's been an overwhelming response that we received to this webinar. I think we will get started because we have a sharp 1 hour and we'll make the most out of it. A very warm welcome. Good evening to everyone who has joined in here for the webinar, Powering Your CSR with Volunteering by Goodera. It's 3:01, and in the next 1 hour, I intend to bring you two powerful speakers, loads of conversations, audience questions and opinion, and one powerful and very interesting topic. With about 15 million white-collar employees, a potential of 150 million hours can be volunteered annually by corporate India towards social and economic development. So says a survey. Then how can our volunteering efforts deliver long-term and sustainable and lasting impact for our communities? Can not-for-profits and corporates co-create programs where volunteers can solve social needs? So please stay tuned till the very end of this webinar till 4 p.m. Before we get started, let's quickly hear from our audience who's joined in. Can I request you to jump onto your phones, scan the QR code that is on the screen, come on to Slido, share your name and your organization. We have close to about 30 people who have joined in. I'm sure Slido is something we've all used, fairly easy. Quickly waiting for everyone to get onto Slido, share your name and your organization, where you come from. I can see a couple of people are participating, right? We've got Adarsh from VCM Shriram Limited. Welcome, Adarsh. Okay, we have a couple of more people. Pratima, Lenovo, Mohini, I'm not sure if I'm reading it in the correct sequence here. Ninad, Mohini, Arpita, Shankar from NIT Foundation. Very warm welcome to our partners from the not-for-profit, corporates. I know a lot of CSR teams have signed up for this. So have a lot of young researchers, students as well, I believe. Okay, Mohini, we have people from the Children's SOS Village. Okay, wonderful. Maybe we'll give it another 10 seconds for some more names to come up. I have Mano. Hi, Mano. Is a good friend. Karishma, Maya, Manisha. Wonderful. I'm sure the names that I see also span across the country. So it's wonderful to have people joining in all across the country for these conversations. So let's quickly move on. Thank you so much for sharing that. Warm welcome to everyone who's just joined in. We are just beginning and quickly moving on. A quick introduction. My name is Ghazal Raina. I've spent the last almost 24 years in the space of education, teacher training, corporate social responsibility, and employee volunteering. In the last 10 years specifically, I've led CSR teams and functions at organizations like Capgemini, Ford Motors, and Standard Chartered Bank. I've joined Goodera recently, and I'm part of the India leadership team here and specifically drive the Me4We programs as a senior director, client engagements and solutions. A little bit about Goodera. Goodera helps organize companies in India and globally meet their volunteering aspirations. To put it very simply, we help organizations create volunteering experiences that are accessible, engaging, and impactful. We work with Amazon, IBM, Dell, Samsung, Tata Communications, EYGDS, HDFC, JP Morgan Chase, and Titan. And I also would like to say that we work with not for profits, close to about 40,000 not for profits across the world as well. Goodera is a partner to Indian CSR companies since 2014. We launched our volunteering offering in 2018 to help corporates execute volunteering campaigns at scale. In 2023, which was a phenomenal year for us, we achieved 1 million volunteering hours and are currently present in over 100 plus countries. A little bit about Me4We. The Me4We programs are a set of carefully curated volunteering projects that have been curated to drive impact, keeping community needs as the center of the focus. And these intend to become a convergence of volunteering with the ambit of CSR goals in companies. The Me4We programs includes 4 themes or 4 verticals: Educate India, Clean India, Green India, and Lighter Life. And the activities around all of these 4 themes align with the Schedule 7 of the CSR law. Before I move on and begin this webinar and introduce my panelists, I just want to give you a few updates. Since this is a 1-hour session, we have kept the webinar open only for Q&A via chat. So please feel free to drop your questions along the webinar as well. And of course, towards the end of the webinar, the last 15 minutes, we will have promise you a Q&A session with the panelists. And I will also request Ajit and Rumi to, whenever they're free, to look at the questions that keep coming up and answer them. So before we move on and invite the panelists here, a quick, again, check with everyone who's joined in. I can see close to 55 people who have joined in here. If I can ask you, what would be a top key takeaway from their session? You can see the poll pop up on your screen. It'll just take a couple of seconds. If you can put in your responses, what are you here to learn more about? You have 3 options there: scaling up volunteering, corporate volunteering efforts, methods and metrics to evaluate volunteering impact. That used to be always something I was very keen to learn more about, and how to develop programs for community-centered approach. If you can just quickly take 2 seconds to answer this poll so we can know what you're looking for. The poll is going to close very soon. If I can request all of you to quickly, the poll should be popping up on your screen right now, and you can quickly take a choice of a topic that you wish to learn more about. Okay, so I think we have the audience poll quite uniformly divided amongst all 3, and I think all of you will not be disappointed, because we are going to touch upon all of these 3 points and much more. So great. So thank you so much for that. Interesting. These are also a similar survey was what we ran on LinkedIn, and interestingly, we saw a lot of people ask questions and pose them as a challenge that they found when they were looking at developing their volunteering to scale. Let me introduce something that all of you are very keen to also know, our 2 panelists for the day. I'll begin with Rumi. Rumi has over 20 years of experience in both corporate and the development sector. She has a rich experience in corporate social responsibility, education, skills, employability, sustainability, technology-led development, and D&I roles. Rumi is currently the global head for corporate responsibility at EY Global Delivery Services, EY GDS, which has over 75,000 employees and a presence in 10 nations. In her role, she set up the GDS strategy for corporate responsibility and operational sustainability with an aim to impact 25 million lives and reach net zero carbon emissions by 2025. In EY GDS, she also focuses on building strong platforms for employees to realize their purpose through volunteering and find meaningfulness at work. At Goodera, we have been proud partners and worked with EY's passionate volunteers for the last 2 years. In 2023, Goodera partnered with EY to engage 10,000 employees or volunteers at Connectable, which is just recently wrapped up, and other immersion projects. EY's sustainability efforts are centered around three thematic areas: supporting next generation, environmental sustainability, and supporting impact entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs. Welcome, Rumi. It's wonderful to have you here. I have personally witnessed the amazing energy and passion of your volunteers at the recent Connectable in Gurgaon. That's some truly inspiring work that you're leading at EY.
Thank you.
I thank you so much for joining us. I was about to just ask you, I'm going to leave you with a question, which is tell us why these three themes were specifically chosen by EY for the community service and volunteering.
Thank you very much, Kazal, and thanks, Goodera, for inviting me here. Lovely to be here and great to see so many of you join in this afternoon webinar. So if I go very quick, those three themes, which is skilling the next generation, supporting impact entrepreneurs, and accelerating environmental sustainability. I think these are all defined, I believe, as an organization by what we are, who we are, where do we want to impact, and our goal is building a better working world. When we look at the goal, our value versus what we really wanted to do, we do believe that impacting young people and helping them get a better life and better future is probably central to everything that we do. And given the climate crisis and the imperatives of making a difference there, um, actions towards sustainability and sustainable actions for our community sort of stays central to everything. And in between this, we believe that one of the most significant players in this ecosystem is the not-for-profit organization and impact organizations. And that's where we believe that if we have to pay attention and support a multiplier impact, then we need to look at what we can do with impact entrepreneurs, how can we support their skill and growth, impact organizations, everyone. So the themes converges across these three areas, and we try to focus most of our efforts around this. But we, of course, also know there are synergies and convergences and interconnectedness, and we try to also see if we can bring those in our interventions.
Thank
Back
you,
to
Rumi.
you,
Thank you
Kazal.
so Thank you so much. And I'll quickly move on to introduce Ajit. Ajit is the co-founder of UNI, one of India's fastest growing volunteer-driven charities. Ajit, along with his co-founder Satish, together with a passionate team based out of Bangalore, drive positive change in the spheres of education, child and women welfare, and mental health. In the last 2 decades, Ajit has founded and led multiple national level volunteer movements and organizations. He studied at St. Stephen's, New Delhi, and Hillsong Leadership College, Sydney. Ajit is passionate about leadership, social change, helping people achieve their fullest potential. He's also IDISC certified trainer and featured in the Forbes magazine and an ODNC fellow and gratitude fellow. Ajit and his wife Tanya have the joy of parenting their two lovely children, Anya and Taya. UNI Trust is also our co-partner for the Me4We program and bring in their enormous wealth of experience managing corporate CSR programs and creating engaging volunteering models for the Me4We programs. Thank you so much for joining, Ajit, and being on the panel. I'm going to leave you with a question, and here it is. UNI, I believe, engages with over 35,000 employees across volunteers across 40 cities in India. It's really an amazing, remarkable number, given that the world just recovered from COVID 4 years back, and so did the world of volunteering. How do you think corporate volunteering has changed post COVID, which was quite unexpected in certain ways and can be said to be a revival of sorts?
Definitely. I think it's been through a few waves, right? Just like COVID. And I think one definitely is the movement from just ad hoc organic volunteering to more intentional sort of program building volunteering, like impact focused volunteering. It's moved beyond today. I feel just okay, let me engage a few people, right? And I think companies are now thinking more strategically. I think volunteering as a whole, as a country also, we are now maturing, right? We're probably about a few years behind where the US and other Western countries are. But as a country, I feel we have a strong ethos of giving back. We have a strong ethos of even giving forward. And I think corporate volunteering has taken that journey. As we as a culture have also evolved, people have more time to give, people have more intention to give, people are more aware of social issues. They bring that whole self to work, right? So as organizations, I think organizations, companies have evolved where they are now strategically looking at how to engage and sort of create impact projects through our volunteering. And also people have involved. So I think both sides, and I think it's a good time to be in volunteering in India today.
Yeah, thank you, Ajit. Thank you. I think very well summarized that it's no longer something which is in a couple of activities on the side, and a lot of companies as well as employees themselves are taking their whole act of volunteering to the next high. Let me start this webinar and invite both Rumi and Ajit to respond to these questions, which have, like I said, come in thanks to the survey and the opinions of many people who participated on LinkedIn. If I were to start right at the beginning, one of the first things to evaluate when we look at corporate volunteering is really the intent behind volunteering, and how organizations are looking at their programs, if they are going to be driven by design, by strategy, and by impact, and if they really want to have a sustainable solution for the community. Rumi, starting with you, organizations who are looking at really now sort of shuffling their entire approach to volunteering are also looking at realigning and setting out their resetting their volunteering approach. So, if we have to look at making this a more community centered approach, what would be a good way to start, and where would be a good way to start?
Hmm. Right. It's a very good question, Ghazal. I think it's a logical next step, like we were all experiencing for this many years, that you look at first and foremost integrating volunteering to your uh, core areas of work. And sometimes I think one way to look at it is the CSR programs that you run. First step is see if there is a possible reasonable integration there. And I'll tell you why it becomes important. There is, of course, another method to do it, and I believe that a combined method works. The first one, from a CSR program perspective, it is very strategic to do so, because it actually helps you to stay focused on a couple of areas that matter to you, and then you sort of go into a measurable change process. Second is that you talked about intent. Intent is extremely important for making any volunteering program successful, but intent has to be also cultivated. You don't just get in seeing intent everywhere. You have to build it. So I think one of the things that I've found very important to do is also look at what does it mean to have the organization actually think through its DNA, and volunteering, sits somewhere in its DNA. So one of the ways to do it, which I thought was very useful, is the building ownership within the organization around volunteering. And it's not just something that a CSR team is doing and an outreach team is doing, but it's something that the organization feels for. And one of the ways to do it is because of the law, organizations, companies are required to do CSR project. But as you start integrating volunteering with CSR project, I believe it starts building more ownership for those CSR projects. And it's a great show and tell when you bring your people, your volunteers, to work in those projects. So integrating it effectively helps to actually tell a better, a cohesive story around who we are, how do we impact, how do we bring in everything. And I think the other thing is that if you look at it from a not-for-profit side, who would look at partnering with you, it's very important that you go beyond funding. You need to be much more holistic these days. Maybe 10 years back it would have been different, but now you need to bring in more than the monies. And that's where volunteering comes in a most effective way. If you're able to design, I think you're able to make a far bigger, better reach. I'll probably add two more things in there. What is important also is to make sure that your implementation plan around it is effective, which means that it just cannot be ad hoc. It cannot start at the middle of the year and then you ask your NGO partners to accommodate, volunteering. You have to see if your portfolio lends itself to volunteering, which means if you're looking at a set of CSR programs and you've been funding them, supporting them, you have to also step back and see, are these the programs where volunteers can effectively play a role? And you might have to tweak the design there, collaboratively working with your NGO partner to make sure that, yes, there is a significant or a relevant, meaningful volunteering scope of work. And that's very important. The second one is, as social impact individual, as professionals, we see impact in a certain different way. And we believe unless it is good, deep, measurable impact, it's no impact at all. So sometimes volunteering don't really lend itself to that kind of an impact. And your volunteers' interest may not match your impact ideas and deep impact interest. So somewhere we have to probably, converge the narrative and clearly say that here's the impact that your not-for-profit organizations will do, but here's the element where, if designed well, your volunteers can play a role, and that is also a measurable good impact. And it's not just being there, coming out and stepping back and saying we had a good time. So I think this kind of designing, it's a lot of designing and co-creating. And unless we do that at the very beginning with your CSR partners on board, who doesn't get a surprise because you've asked for a volunteering opportunity with them, but you co-create the program with them in a way that they see the value of volunteers coming in and delivering a certain part of the outcome, and you see the value and you're able to convince your volunteers to be meaningfully engaging and lend their skills to those efforts. I'm going to pause here, though, like I mentioned, that a CSR route is the one way, but we do also believe that when you're looking at volunteering, you have to probably look at pretty much a funnel approach to an extent, right? Where you have a set of volunteering opportunities that are meant and designed for impact integrated to your CSR programs. And could be a set of activities that you also do across the themes that you have prioritized, which also is meant to create a stronger buy-in, input, and sort of some sort of measurable outcomes from the volunteers side. I'll pause here, Ghazal.
Yeah, thank you, Bhumi. I think that's very well brought out, is to also be very honest in choosing the activities which can make the kind of impact volunteering can make it, vis-a-vis maybe a CSR program which is designed to have certain outcomes spread over a couple of years. I'm going to move to Ajit because I want him to give his perspective from the other side, being part of an organization which works both with corporates as well as community directly. What would be your practical, I would say, advice on the approach of dovetailing volunteering into CSR programs?
Yeah. I love the way Rumi framed it, right? Designing it, because you're designing a solution to some social problem, whatever that is, right? We don't have enough trees, children are lacking XYZ in education, whatever the social problem is. And the first question to ask is volunteering able to fill this gap, right? So I think the term we use at UNI is dual impact. Right, we understand that we are trying to create some social change, but also the volunteer who is creating that change is also impacted. And we hold both in tension, right? I want to be able to create impact for the volunteer, like their lives has changed, their worldview has changed, they are growing from this experience, but we also want to be able to create impact to the beneficiary, right? So we see actually our beneficiaries at UNI are dual. It is both the volunteer who comes and volunteers with the UNI, and also say it is the child that is being taught, or it is the community that we're doing a cleanup with, whatever that is. So holding both in tension is what creates good programs. When in our experience, we've seen when you index either to one or the other, then a program goes out of balance. Either then volunteers will not come back because you sort of use them to just photocopy papers and nothing useful. They felt like they weren't able to contribute well. Or then the beneficiary is just sort of, you're just, it's a tick box, right? Thoda engagement karna, we'll do it and move on. So when you hold those two in tension and design a good program, and ask that fundamental question, does volunteering actually leverage this? And we found that, like, for us, we're able to deliver a program at 1/3 the cost because we have 3,000 volunteers who give us, X amount of hours a week. And then we can scale to 40 cities easily. So just when you design well, hold those two in place, you really can see volunteering help you scale and create larger impact also.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ajit. And I think the answer lies in the collaboration that is required for both the not for profits and the corporates to come together, to also be honest and realistic about what would be probably some of the challenges that they would face in working not just together but also achieving their goals, which brings me to the question for the audience here, which is always something I'm curious about, is not very often do we get probably honest set of hands answering this, is what are the challenges that you faced in aligning volunteering with your CSR goals. Again, a quick poll that will pop up on your screens, and if I can request you to just quickly take about maybe 2 seconds to 2 or 3 seconds to take this poll. We have close to about 75, 76 people who have joined in, and the numbers going up.
Hopefully the anonymity of Zoom polls will allow some
Yes,
honest answering here.
absolutely. So one of the things that I've always seen, and I think was always a tough balance, was where does the employee interest lie, and where does the organization vision mission of making a change in the community lie. A lot of times employees wanted to do some really amazing activities around animal welfare. They wanted to revive some of the extinct species. They wanted to protect strays, but unfortunately, the companies didn't cover that. So a lot of employees came, but not with their heart and soul into it. So I think that has always been my favorite challenge there. Well, I think it's almost time up for the poll. We'll wait for the responses. All right. Okay, so we have almost 63% people who said, "Oh, they." I mean, my challenge was their challenge, is their challenge as well. Boosting employee interest in specific volunteering events, I can completely understand. And then the rest of the audience is divided between how to integrate in volunteering in their broader CSR strategies, company values, and of course measuring impact in of their CSR within their CSR programs. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Very interesting responses, and I think the second half of this webinar should give you a lot of answers to that. All right. I meet a lot of CSR teams. I think over the last couple of months, as I have traveled a couple of cities, I've seen that there's always this question of scale versus quality that pops up. And I've seen that the CSR teams and the heads have the aspiration, they have the approvals, they have the number of volunteers as well. But probably they sometimes grapple with the question of where to begin and sustain their scaled up journey in volunteering. Some of the things that they mentioned in their wish list was mobilize a much larger number of volunteers, optimize whatever current available resources, especially budgets that were earmarked for volunteering, and ensure that their volunteering programs can now address a growing need for their communities. So I think these were some of their wish list items. I'm going to bring this question in as a spotlight question. That means it's going to remain the same for Ajit and Rumi. I'll start with Ajit. And I'm not going to go so much into the theory part of this question, but what would be the most common mistake companies make while scaling volunteering? And what would be your fix-it advice to them?
Ask me to comment on mistakes that companies make.
Yes.
This is how an NGO loses funders 101.
This is how an NGO actually becomes, the go-to advisor, saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think a common mistake I've seen with scale is just trying. Yeah, I mean, when you only look at one metric, say, for example, a metric is employee volunteering hours, right? When you only look at that, then your end goal is as long as I can tick that box, then everything else doesn't matter, right? If that employee is, not doing anything useful or actually, because sometimes we need to admit that volunteering can also hurt the ecosystem, right? So I think just being aware of that fact, knowing that what my volunteering is, what my volunteering hours are going towards, and they are actually helping further, that social cause or solve that social problem, and being aware of that at scale. Because if you're only looking at the volunteering numbers, your volunteering hours metric, then nothing else matters. So I feel like for a corporate that is looking to scale up, finding solutions that actually can scale, because you need to think of solutions that are both sustainable and also impactful, not just scalable. Scale is always only one out of three things that create a good program. So if you have the other two also, right, are these sustainable activities and are these impactful activities? If you can look at those two and marry those with scale, you have a great program actually, right? So I would say a marriage of those three is what makes a good program.
Right. Rumi, over to you. What would be a common mistake companies make? Not necessarily UI, but you worked across so many organizations. And what would be your fix-it advice to them?
I would have to say there is no fixed it advice. There are scenarios differ depending on the kind of the organization, what is their intent. For example, that if you have to scale means you're actually, you're jumping from where you are to where you want to be. It's a fairly big jump for many organizations. For example, for us, the our goal is we want to engage 25,000 volunteer and upwards every year. So you can imagine that the volume involved. But when you have a volume like that you decide and agree on with your management, you also have to work a little bit around whether this is just a headline number or whether there is real intent, whether the organization is going to support you. Because to plan scale, you also need a reasonably fluid budget. Even if you have decided that, look, X6 amount is what I'm going to allocate for a budget for volunteering, logistics, and so on, you need a bit of fluidity. By third quarter, when you have planned a lot of things, we plan across 4 quarters, for example, you find that your management says, well, we have utilized what we have utilized. Please don't further spend on volunteering. All your plans go on a toss. So I think it's very important to, for corporates, at least for organizations like us, we make sure that we have an agreement, a clear path that we show when we design scale. Just the scale. I'm going to go to the definition of scale later, like Ajit did. So if you are defining a scale and you're agreeing on a scale, first and foremost, the intent needs to be backed by some resource, at least agreement that yes, this is going to be spent, because this is a challenge that I've seen with many organizations where you have a plan at the beginning of the year, but you're not able to follow through because of these challenges. The second is, I think, where it fails most of the time is internally, when you got to have, let's say you are great in a volunteer plan, you have laid out plan that gives you a funnel approach, a large number of people does a 2 hours and 4 hours of activity, that is a certain outcome, output that you've measured. You have another set of volume of people who's doing skills volunteering for 8 or 10 hours, which measures to a certain level. And then you have a few hundred, a few thousand, in our case, about 4,500 people who do deep skills volunteering ranging from 20 hours to 50 hours and upwards. Now, suppose you've designed it very well. Where many times organizations fail is if they don't have a robust communication policy process internally. That communication is key to holding to your employees, inspiring them to continuously be with you and fall into this part of the plan, and making sure that what they are signing up for, they understand. So that bit about communication is something that I always insist, and I think that's a key to making sure that your plan is successful, because you can build brilliant plans of scale. Not going to be successful if you still don't get those folks with you when you need them. One of the things that, again, maybe sometimes teams miss doing is that, please understand that volunteering is not your KPI in your job. Volunteering is organization's goal. Volunteering's biggest outcome is employee happiness, meaningfulness, purpose at work, and so on. So it's very much an HR goal also. So when you build a plan, you've got to have others included in the plan. It's not a CSR team's plan. It's an organization plan. And you need to have network across the board, across all functions and departments across the organizations, who represent that vision and who's able to cascade that information out, making sure that they are as much inspiring and mobilizing people as you are. So to me, this two points are, where I've seen most of the struggles happening. And we had we focus. I always say that 50% of our efforts are focused on communication, and that is internal communication, not sending our media reports, media press releases out, but making sure the people who were with us last year stays with us, and we are able to bring in more, a 10%, 20% more in the coming years. So scale, I think, is a function of much of this internal dynamics and thorough planning, as much it is about convincing not-for-profits that you can bring value to the work that they're already doing, or convincing them that it's not a tick mark. If there are volunteers spending 2 hours with you, please make sure that their time is effectively utilized. Keep a lookout for what skills they bring on the table and leverage that skill. You're not just getting a free manpower to do just anything, but ensure that you're able to utilize the manpower when the manpower is with you to that extent. So I think this match is very important, and the fixes would be probably this: that you have to be deep focused on communication, and you have to be very focused to make sure that you have the plan rolled in along with a bit of a agreement on the budget as you move forward. Not bit, quite a bit of that agreement, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Rumi. I think I completely agree with you on both the points. That one is that you need to carry all the stakeholders within the organization with you as you roll out a sustained plan. And it's not just scaling up in that particular year, you're also now setting standards for the rest of the for the coming years as well. So you can't have a spurt growth in 1 year and then fall back to probably a lesser number. So I think it has to be a thought through plan. And I think one of the things that I experienced and brought in was having a failure plan as well, and also making sure that I plugged in wherever there was possibility of failure as well. So it helps always to take people along that entire journey. Let's move forward. Thank you so much for both of you for helping us demystify the spotlight question, adding a lot more practical inputs and value into it. I'll request everyone to have a look at the 2 links that our team has put in. If you're a corporate and interested in exploring more on the CSR programs and volunteering in CSR programs, you can book a call with our engagement team, and the link is provided here. And if you are a not-for-profit and interested in partnering with Goodera, there's also a link for you to engage with us. So please do utilize those links, and we'll be happy to talk to you. Let me quickly move on and to the last segment before the Q&A. So I hope all of you I'm sure you already have a lot of questions for our panelists. Please feel free to use the chat button option and put your questions. Our team out there in the background will consolidate these, and we'll take it up in the last 15 minutes of the webinar. Right. So one more poll. I think these are very interesting ways of understanding the audience pulse here. All right. The next question, this is the third poll, and the last poll here is one area of help that you would that would help you maximize your impact of your volunteering programs. We have four options this time. You'll see the options pop up on your screen. So one is availability of strategic partners for volunteering, finding the most needy cause, or I think a deserving cause, integration of technology, one of my favorite pain points in some of my roles, and boosting volunteer participation internally within the organizations. Yes. So quickly, if we can have your opinions on this poll, what out of these would actually help you tremendously to maximize your impact? So these are also responses which came in from our LinkedIn surveys. Um, and I'm also very quite curious that we are still saying that finding a deserving cause around us, and I think it could be purely subjective. So someone may find planting trees still a very deserving cause, and a lot of companies say that they want to now uh, go on to looking at um, a cause which is probably climate change or way beyond that. So I think different companies, different ways, different goals. I think the poll is about to close. So I'll request the 70 odd people who are here on our webinar to quickly take the poll. All right, so we have a mixed bag of answers. Almost, I think the top area would be technology for volunteer management and scaling up, followed by uh, availability of strategic partners for volunteering. And there's a split tie between boosting volunteer participation internally and then finding the most needy cause. I think great over the years, I think we've also had a lot of clarity from the government on where really there's the most effective utilization, as well as of the CSR money and volunteering lie. I think that's probably a problem which is slowly getting solved. All right. Thank you so much for that poll. I'm reminded of this conversation, Rumi and Ajit, that I had many years ago with a very senior leader who was heading a business vertical. And he offered that his team could create a tool which could measure the impact of his team's volunteering events. They used to come very frequently, almost on a monthly basis. And I think he was probably very early front runners who was asking other leaders to look at the impact. And he told me that, can I create a tool, Ghazal, which would help you to measure? And I told him that I would love a tool which could measure joy, gratitude, and transformation of a human soul and the society that volunteering can achieve. um, it wasn't a lighter moment. It was something that was on my wish list. But then I'm also reminded of Mr. Narayan Murthy's famous quote, "In God we trust, everybody else bring data to the table." And I think on that table are also seated sustainability and CSR teams. Um, and they also have a lot of data to bring to the table, whether it's internal or external reporting, or even their NGO partners or their own internal mechanisms. Data plays a very crucial role in actually defining how and what we are doing and how well we are doing it. Which takes me to the third and the most critical aspect of this webinar, powering CSR programs with volunteering, uh, to the aspect of measuring the impact of volunteering efforts. And I know that this is always a tricky one, it's a tough one. Um, Rumi, if I can begin with you, and I'll actually ask you to simplify and demystify measuring volunteering programs. If you could also give an example of how EY looks at measuring the contribution of so many employees, whether it's the outcome or the impact. Over to you.
Sure. So let me take a step back and see, when you're talking about measuring, like all other measurement parameters, you're looking at process that is a matrix that is accurate, adaptable, flexible, because different volunteering lets itself to different outcome and output and so on, and trust, because you may have a certain matrix, an external stakeholder or a new leader may not accept your matrix, so you've got to build something or adopt something that is able to tick mark all of this. And why I mention trust is that sometimes what happens is, I see trust as a life cycle, which means that you're measuring not just the outcomes, you're measuring from the very beginning. What was the need? Was it an authenticated need that was, sort of positioned by a not-for-profit or an organization that needs help? It could be even simple as planting a tree. I think the question is, where are you planting? What is it going to serve? Where is it going to go? Is it a part of the government afforestation project? Is it a part of a private land where a farmer wants to grow because so and so? So that needs to be also authentic, explained, and that should be a part of that the process too. Second, what are volunteers expected to do? What are they really doing? Are they moving a bucket from here to here the whole day for 2 hours? Move bucket from place part one to part two, place one to place two. What are they really doing? So that needs to be clearly called out, and the input defines the output. It is as matrix is very simple, that if your input is creating learning cards, let's say, that's one kind of input, versus a 1 hour of, let's say, mentoring 100 students on how to problem solve on a capstone project, which is a data analytics capstone project. So you see, the input is different, the output is going to be different. And second and third, how does the NGO benefit? So I tried to simplify the life cycle approach, but I think any impact measurement matrix needs to have that life cycle approach. Otherwise, you're measuring one part. Were your volunteers happy? Is your NGO happy? It doesn't really come together. So that entire coming together is what I would call a matrix, or a format that people would trust. But I would take a step back and say, really, who's asking for it? Are there really enough number of people who are asking for impact of volunteering? Does that impact your bottom line of spends? Does that impact your bottom line of how you tell your impact story in a year? Because that defines your impact criteria that you take up. Do you want to take the life cycle approach? No, nobody's reading 100 pages report or 20 pages or even 10 pages. So what is it that you need to call out? Data is God. So for us, that the data is the first thing that must speak. People can claim I have volunteered. Only data. We do have a platform globally that helps us measure and map and understand who has done what, when, for how many hours, what was the outcome, here's the evidence, and so on. So our global platform helps us. And of course, we work with you, with the Goodera team, who provides us more timely information on really what happened on ground, which then feeds into the entire system for us to do a slice and dice around who did what, how did it impact, where did we start, what was a program like, and what was the results. So the results conversation or narrative also differs depending on what your input sizing was. And it's not homogeneous. Like I mentioned, it's a pyramid. You can't have one matrix for the entire pyramid. The matrix differs, depends on what is the life cycle of each of those activities. In some cases, like you were mentioning, how do I measure that people were happy or they felt better and so on? Internally, we do. I think many organization has that, which is a employee satisfaction survey of kind. We call it a pulse survey, which takes the pulse of employees every 6 months, asking questions that help them explain how their experience was at the organization, with multiple experiences that we all curate. Volunteering is an experience that we curate. Operation sustainability, or being sustainable, or being a green avatar, is an experience that we curate. And they tell us, they rate us in terms of how their experiences was. So far, we have got fairly high rating as compared to many other business functions, because it seems people find meaningfulness and purpose, and they use this platform to realize their purpose. So that's one way to actually reinforce that if you engage your people in work beyond their day-to-day work, in meaningful activities, they are happier, they are more satisfied, they feel better belongingness to the organization, and so on. So that's your internal matrix. And then there is the external matrix. So I think it's not very simple, it's not very homogeneous. However, we don't want to complicate it also. Don't make it too complex. Because like I said, who's asking? Unless you have a regulatory requirement to report, people don't report. So it is important for you to understand how your things are going. So, feedback, impact measurement, seeing the data, analyzing the data, understanding the patterns and the trends are important for you to design better and to have a better satisfaction, both sides. But we may not be still ready for very complex measurement matrix, you know, even though I say the life cycle is important to measure. So, I think we are still not there. And uh, at this point, what is important is to be able to honestly, uh, sort of evaluate and report internal, external, wherever we do, input versus the outcome, what you see, or an impact. We're not going to impact, let's say, a output or an outcome that you see from your volunteering, experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Rumi. And I think I completely agree with that. I say with the question that who's asking the question, and depending on that, probably start looking at developing a matrix for that. I'm going to go to Ajit and ask him that being part of you and I, if you have to develop a good to have metrics grid that volunteering programs should have, practically and from a realistic point of view, because I know that you will also be an advisory for a lot of corporates when they are looking at designing their volunteering programs. What would that metrics grid look like if you had to put also simple to complex metrics for a program? Maybe let's take the example of an education program here, because that's also something close to a lot of people's heart.
Right.
Yeah, would you like me to just repeat that last part, because I know I've addressed a lot of things in that. If you had to develop and design
Yeah. A metric
practical
for,
and realistic
yeah,
metric for a simple to complex set of metrics for a good education program, what would it be like?
definitely. I think a lot of it comes back to what Rumi shared, was what is the intent, and the second piece is really who is asking for these pieces, right? Because what we found sometimes is companies try and force fit. We did 4 sessions, and from 4 sessions, I want you to show me before after. I'm like, Bhaiya, in 4 sessions, we are only not learning anything in life. Like, what makes you think in a virtual class? Like, my kids have been going to school now for 3 years and 5 years, right? And there's 20 things. I'm still like, so you haven't learned this yet? And so I feel like sometimes when we look at metrics, it's good to know it, to be sort of very realistic about these things, because when we get to the social space, you realize how complex it is, right? You realize how complex teaching a child, even just the alphabet is, right? Like Pratham took years to build this alphabet, word, sort of sentence, story, metric that they built for a child's progress. So what we've learned in the last 10 years is we went from just sort of volunteering as friends, so there were no metrics when we started, to then building this extremely complex metric structure, to then now saying, can we just focus on, the key things that matter, and don't get reporting on 45 things that nobody's reading, right? So I think we've taken that journey, and whichever piece you're looking at, Ghazal, I think a lot of times when we work with companies, we try and narrow it down to what actually matters, right? Let's look at 2, 3 things, measure them well. What is, and it comes back from that intent statement. This is the change we want to see in a child. So for us, it is obviously measuring whether a child is progressing, how much they are progressing. We do an NPS rating at the end. Just did they, not just did their scores increase, but did they actually enjoy the process of studying at a United Learning Center through the entire year? The other thing we track is, it's slightly more outcome focused, but it's process. We have certain culture building pieces that should happen in every class. So we track those and say, did you start your class with, we have a tool called Good Things, then you end your class with a positive story. So we know that if you do those small pieces, eventually the needle moves forward, right? So we track a mix of input and outcome, and then in all best sense, we really hope that students are. But But what we've learned to do is balance that between the volunteer and the beneficiary. We track some pieces for the volunteer, some pieces for the beneficiary, and not overcomplicate it, because the moment you give someone an Excel sheet, the first thing you want to do is fill all those columns and rows, right? And then when you're trying to scale that, getting 40,000 students to fill that in, 35 locations, somebody is going to, not be filling that out very accurately. So yeah, that would just been very short.
Yeah.
What our journey has been like with metrics. Yeah.
Very interesting, Ajit. I think that advice is really worth its weight in gold. That sometimes, a lot of times, in fact, you don't need to really complicate and have very complex metrics for something as simple as probably teaching a child for an hour. You can't move the needle on a lot of things there, because you're, as volunteers or as volunteering a program, you may not be influencing everything around that child or the student or the ecosystem. But I think if you could look at just three things, including does the child now not fear maths as a subject, if I could
Yeah.
call it? If the child is ready, joining the class before time, excited to be throughout the class, doesn't miss your classes. I think simple parameters like this, when I looked at a lot of designing a lot of employee volunteering programs in education, I would add, and a lot of people would say, why are these important? Why don't we look at the child's ability to handle maths? Well, that will come later, but I think first is the fact that this child is absolutely petrified of maths as a subject. So I think that's the whole beauty, and I also tie up with what Rumi was saying, that the narrative gets rebuilt into the story that you're trying to say within the organization
Very
as
true.
well. And these simple metrics, or even maybe if you include probably one complex metrics in that, and you could say that we will date this, that only after 6 months or only after a year is when we can see the needle moving on some of these metrics, is an important thing to declare within the organization. So thank you so much. I think we are almost towards the end of this webinar. A couple of minutes more to go. I'm sorry I was not able to take up too much time for question and answers, but if everyone is okay, we could probably extend this webinar by 5 minutes so that we could take the questions up. Rumi, Ajit, if you're okay, we will move to the Q&A section. Now, you will see a slide there, and I think you also see two QR codes, which our team has put in there for you to engage with us if you want to drop us a note about working with us and understanding probably a little bit more about what you do in the space of volunteering, whether you're a corporate or an NGO. We'll be happy to do that as well. I'm just going to go to the first question, and Ajit, Rumi, feel free to take it up. The first one says, corporates, do they have any budgets for non-CSR activities, especially for volunteering, like wall painting, drawing, etc.? Rumi, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. It's not easy to get that budget, but yes, I think that budget is necessary to have to some extent. Like I said, that a volunteering is an organization-wide engagement that helps people feel, employees feel much more connected, belonging, they stay longer in organizations. So all of these are data and surveys and studies that have been done globally, and it needs to be pitched and positioned in that manner. It's not something that must come out of the 2% CSR budget. That's one. The second is that there are ways to also look at it, like we were talking about integrating with your CSR program. So part of what really goes out as volunteering cost, a part of it, like you mentioned, it is incidentals, which mean, or things that you require to do. A wall painting helps students have a better learning experience in school. It could be a part of your program expenses also. Of course, employees traveling from office to the school is not going to be included there. So there are ways to include it, but one should also ask for a budget, as it is pretty much an organization-wide mandate or an agenda or a to-do than a CSR team only.
Yeah, thank you, Rumi. And I'll go to the next question. Maybe both of you could take this as well. But Ajit, the participant says that we have majority of our beneficiaries in rural areas in the states we work in. Our corporate volunteers okay to travel and spend a day during various activities. We definitely can't do this pro bono. Our corporates okay if we have a comprehensive budget for the same. So I think we probably, Rumi, Ajit, you could share your experiences on that. um,
If you
basically
want to go
adding.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think usually what we do here is, I mean, we try and look for companies which have offices close by. And so even if it's the closest town, closest city, and then usually we work with them both from a CSR and a corp angle, right? We say, hey, this is what, if you are funding this project, you can also do X, Y, Z, ABC with the children. I mean, ideally would be at least once a year, once a quarter, biannually, try and get them to come for half a day to the center. If it's too far to visit, what we try and use technology, right? That's the second thing we can try and use to connect both. So there are a lot of our centers which are in very remote places, some in like the hills of Darjeeling. We've bought, 15 laptops from a company and we've connected them virtually to the sort of do the company. I think for us, what's really important is how do I create that connect, right? The earlier question we asked is how do we get volunteers involved? You get volunteers involved when they feel for a cause, when they connect with a cause, when they want to really come and help. And you get them connected by showing them first, because once you meet a child, you're going to spend some time with them and you will create that connect, right? And do companies have a budget for that? Definitely, you shouldn't be doing it pro bono. You are the charity, right? If you're already doing a fair amount of things pro bono, so companies usually are okay to fund some of these pieces, right? The other thing we do is a lot of times they can make stuff in the office, which we then take to our centers, right? So we're doing back to school kits now. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right, from learning material, etc., that they can make and then send to the kids. Yeah.
yeah.
Those are
I
just some
think
ideas.
that's where also virtual volunteering would play a big role. I know there are a lot of our corporate clients who also have virtual mentoring that goes on for students, beneficiaries that they're supporting in rural areas with scholarship, and they get mentored by folks in the corporate, and they necessarily don't really travel always. Rumi, your two bits on that.
I think I agree with everything that Ajit said because that's exactly how we address some of those partners and programs where we can't go every quarter. But we do try to see that if for example, if there are 20 schools, 50 schools there, we are at least able to touch maybe one or two or a few more. And we curate those volunteering programs, which means the company spends for logistics at least, even if the other part of the work is sort of curated within other kind of programs. So that's the one way. But I would also say that not every program lends itself to volunteering. And we don't believe that every NGO who's doing fantastic, credible work on ground would be in a position to receive in-person volunteers. That's where a lot of our skills volunteering is also associated with how do we help the NGO track its organizations better, do better project monitoring, the kind of work that helps an organization to be better in their missions. So from a volunteer engagement perspective, that works. You're doing virtual, you're doing strategy consulting, for example, which we do as a business. We offer it to a lot of NGOs. So for us, that engagement is still there. It may not be in person, physical for everyone. Some of it we still curate because, like I was saying, show and tell is very important for us too. So we do try to see that we are able to take a whole lot of people. We do this in Kerala, in tribal areas. We have done that in some of the interiors here too. And we are able to take them there for them to experience what it is, come back and help in better solutions building, including for the same NGO that we are talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great examples of how to bridge that gap. I have another question related to the CSR budget, an interesting one, that if the company doesn't have a CSR budget for volunteering and they still want to go ahead, how do they make their programs or impact sustainable in the long run? Which means that they're not sure whether every year they will get a CSR budget. That's what I understand. How would you address that? Rumi, do you want to take that?
Yes, and I would say that that it's not the ideal scenario that you have. Look, volunteering happens. Volunteering, as you can know the name, it doesn't always. It happens because people are inspired to volunteer. And we have, despite our organizational's goal, we have had volunteers who have gone to the interiors at their own cost. 20 of them decided to get a bus, pay it up, go for one night, stay in the panchayat provided a community house and they stayed overnight, they did the work, and they came back, ate whatever was available. It was all their inspiration to do. When they came back, they told an outstanding impact story because they experienced it. We had the the village pradhan talk to us on phone and all of that. So there are ways to do it. It's not ideal, but volunteering is also sometimes very inspirational and people are able to figure out. The other thing, which is a more practical thing to do, is that there has to be some sense of volunteering in that organization. If the organization doesn't have a CSR budget, is not interested to put some monies aside from a marketing, business, income, profits, etc., then it is difficult to run a volunteering program. Then you are primarily going back to option one, which is you need a lot of people who are inspired enough to do good and spend something out of their pocket. I will tell you that it has worked in many cases too. Then you'll probably look at a model like that. Or you have to tell the organization some monies needs to be taken out from somewhere to be able to support at least basic logistics, which matters to employees.
Yeah, I think that is a good solution here for the person who's written in the query and the question here. I love the fact, the stories that you tell us, Rumi, on how employees actually took it on themselves to actually go and either sort of complete the activity. And I've also had, I have so
Because
many.
we told them it is too expensive for us to support a bus drive. You can't spend that much too on employees' expenses. We say, no, it's too expensive. It's too far. It's too much in the interior. We cannot support this much of travel and stay and food and for so many people. They said, okay, we'll do
Yes.
it on our own. So they did it on their own.
Yeah.
And then others started following that model wherever we said we can't afford it.
Yeah, these are amazing stories of transformation. We always sometimes people ask what really is the benefit of volunteering. I would say there is truly the transformation of not just the community and beneficiaries, but the people on the other side who are giving there. And I think that's the power of volunteering. And I think on that really high note, we'll probably wrap this webinar up, which has been a very interesting, candid, and practical conversation on volunteering, whether we were looking at scale, whether we were looking at measuring impact, or we are looking at really starting to design volunteering, which is now going to power your CSR programs. Thank you, Rumi. Thank you so much for coming here, for sharing, such a wealth of information, programs. I'm truly inspired by the work that EY and your volunteers are doing. Ajit, thank you so much for being here, and it's really amazing to hear and read about you and I's tremendous journey that you've made in the last couple of years. And we look forward to partnering with you and many programs for the Me for We. Last but not the least, I want to thank everyone who joined in here. I know we have some people who dropped out at 4. You would have seen the QR codes and the link. If not, then you can just hop on to our social media platform or on the LinkedIn page and drop us a note. Of course, if you have any queries on specifically on CSR programs and dovetailing them into your CSR vision, mission, and goals, I'm happy to have a chat with you. So on that note, thank you so much. Wish you in advance a happy weekend ahead.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks, Ghazal. Thanks, team.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ghazal, and thank you to Goodera for organizing this. And thank you all for attending. Yeah, good one.